Alright, so these are the parts for putting coilovers on the front of my 2001 Explorer, which is the same as the 95 to 01 Explorers, and then the 98 to 2011 Ford Rangers. So up top, these two pieces up here, they're the reinforcement brackets for the factory shock mount on the frame. Then these pieces make up the reinforcement or the relocation of the bump stop so that it clears the coilover. This group over here, these pieces right here make up the lower shock mount that attach to the A-arm, and then these pieces through here make up the pieces that go into the upper shock mount that's on the frame to mount the coilover. So I'll show you along how I assemble all this. Alright, so for the upper mount first, what I start with is I cut a piece of spacer that's just a piece of little square stock, 1.25 inches wide to bolt it through, and then I put that through, and then each of the pieces just tab on. You can see how they just kind of tab in there and they set on there. So this one is this is a spacer that goes up to the top into the shock mount to help hold it, but that's how this part goes together. So now you just weld it up. That'll be next. Alright, so for the lower mount, there's a difference between the driver's side and the passenger side. They're mirror images of each other. So you gotta make sure that this piece is flipped up the right direction. So the side I got sitting up now is gonna be for the driver's side. So then I put the same 1.25 inch spacer in here, put them together, and then this piece, it'll only fit really one direction, because you'll see if I put it that way, it overhangs too far. If I go this way, then everything lines up. So what I'll do first is get them tack welded on, and then weld in the grooves on the bottom, and then grind these flush before I put the next set of pieces on, because there's some pieces I gotta get welded onto the bottom of this. So I'll tack these on and get this welded on first. Alright, so once the shock mount pieces are tack welded on, you can take and put on the side piece can get put on here, and you'll notice that the tabs are different on both ends, so it can only go one direction. So that way it lines itself up. So that'll get tack welded on next. Alright, so once the side piece is tack welded on, you can see how this piece mount here mounts to the shock holes that are in the lower A-arm, but it sits at an angle, so you got to kind of space it up. The reason this piece is a different angles on each end is so that you know which way to stack it. Since this one lines up with the piece below it, then these two holes are a different distance than these two holes up here, so you can't spin it and put it in on the wrong spot. So that way it goes in. You can see where I had welded in the top mounts first, then ground them down so that this piece could go on. So this piece gets tack welded on, and then finish weld the whole thing out. Alright, so for the bump stop relocation, there's a left and a right too, so the driver and passenger sides are opposite of each other. So this one I have mocked up, it's upside down, but this is going to be the driver's side one. So we'll tack weld this side on, and then put the piece on the other side, and then that'll all get welded up. So I'll show you that here in a second. Alrighty, so this is the bump stop mount tacked up. So you'll see how it tabs together. They're different sizes, so the piece can only go on one way. And driver's side and the passenger side are opposite of each other. So this is how the driver's side goes together, and then the factory bump stop will bolt back down onto that. So that's how she goes. So we'll get that all welded up, then we'll move on to having everything welded up and putting it all on the Explorer. Alrighty, so got the Explorer up in the air, got the tire off, and I've already pulled the torsion bars out, so the suspension doesn't have a torsion bar in it anymore. The next things you need to do to start on this is sway bar needs to come out. The upper ball joint, you'll end up having to pull it in and out a couple of times, and then the shock out, and then this upper, I don't know, little protection thing kind of is in the way for working on it for right now. So you can pop that out, and it'll be put back in when we finish up. So I'll get all that stuff out of the way and move on. Alright, so once you get the sway bar disconnected, the shock out, the upper A-arm disconnected from the knuckle, you can unbolt right here. You can unbolt the brake line, and then down here you can take off the factory bump stop. So this is where you're at. The next one is going to be, this piece has to be cut off. You cut it about right there, and then cut it back behind here. So that's why you kind of need to get all the stuff out of here, so that that can get cut out of there. While you're cutting it out, you gotta make sure you protect everything else and don't cut your boots on your CVs. So that'll be the next thing to do, is cut that out. Alright, you can see here the factory bump stop mount's been cut off. Basically back, there was where the back bolt was. So you gotta cut it pretty much back to that. Then just down here, across there, kind of ground smooth. Can't leave anything sticking out here, otherwise it'll hit the coilover once you mount that. So then next stop is going to be getting this piece on here, just like so. It mounts up here kind of flush with that, so it keeps the bump stop at the same elevation. And then tack weld on the braces that go on either side of the shock mount. So that'll be next. Alrighty, so now you'll see the two supports tacked in on the coil bucket and the old shock bucket. This one on the left hand side here has a notch out for the bolt that'll pass through to hold the coil over. And they come down here, and then you'll see the bump stop mount tack welded on. So you'll obviously see that where this used to go can no longer be there because this is in the way, so we'll re-drill and tap that over here. But once these are all tacked on, we'll put the bump stop back in just to check it. You need a 5/16 bolt, like 1 inch long, to put that back on. It'll bolt through here and then go through there. And then we'll put the coil spring in and double check everything, make sure everything clears. So that'll be the next move. Alright, so here's the shock kind of mocked in. I don't have nuts or anything on everything. You do have the two bolt holes down the bottom here that the factory shock mounts into need to be drilled out to 3/8, and then that lower bolt needs to be trimmed. If you look at it right, let's see if you can get it in there. Kind of dark. But the lower bolt that holds that in has to be trimmed down. Same with the top one here, because it ends up being too long, so you just need to cut about 1/4 inch off that end, because you gotta get so the shank goes through everything. But everything here looks pretty good. This actually, the shock mount, or the bump stop mount, needs to be moved over towards the front of the vehicle about 1/4 inch. Let me jack it up and I'll show you why. Alrighty, so with the suspension all the way up, pretty much, you can go a little bit higher, but you can see where the bump stop's not quite hitting all the way on. So it needs to come over just a little bit more, and then there's just enough space right next to the bolt right here that it can come over about another 1/4 inch. So we'll tack that off, but everything else seems to be pretty good. So the other pieces are all good to get welded on. So just move that over and then everything get welded on. Alright, so now you can see where I moved over the mount about 1/4 inch. It hits a whole lot better right down here, and it will just clear the lower shock mount. So that's where that's at. So now protect everything, and I'll weld on all the brackets, and then I gotta drill these two holes in the back up here, and then the lower mount has a 1/2 inch hole on the side right here, and then up in the front there's a 3/8 hole that has to be drilled in the A-arm as well, and those can all be bolted on. So that'll be the next thing to do. Alright, so I got the braces welded in on each side here, inside and out, all the way down. Got the bump stop down here welded on and mounted. So now we need to mount this, because it used to mount right here over where the brace now goes. It would have been in the way, so we just need to pull it over here. What I'm going to do is just, it'll be held because it's in here, but right in this corner up in here on this mount, I'm just going to drill a hole and tap it for 5/16 bolt, and just run a 5/16 bolt in there. And then once I get that mounted, then I just got to make sure that the hard line up here is not rubbing on the back of the shock mount. So that'll be next. I also got the bottom two holes drilled in. The front one up here is a 3/8 hole, and this is a 1/2 inch hole right here on the side. Got a couple extra washers in there because that's where the limit strap will end up going and tying back in up here to hold it. So this needs to be a 1-inch bolt, or an 1 1/4, doesn't matter. This one has to be 1 1/4 right here. This one back here, so that it clears this bolt. Then the one in the back has to be 1.5 inches. So that goes. So I'll get this mounted up. Once that mounted up, then the coilover can go back in and it's ready to go. Alright, so here's the coilover mounted and in. The upper arm connected back up. So a few things I had to do is I had to grind just a little bit off of the bump stop right here so it would clear the coilover. Right now it's at full drop and there's kind of no way to get it, but the spring ends up hitting on the back of the A-arm, so you just have to limit the travel. So I got some limit straps that are coming, so I'll put brackets on there for that next. That'll stop that from happening and then limit the travel on it as this is all the way down. And then I tighten these down, put about a 1/4 inch of preload on the spring. We'll see how that does as far as height once I put the weight back on it. If I need to add a little more, I can. But now I just got to put the sway bar back on and button up the tires. I'll show you the passenger side. It went together about the same. There's just one little, really, the only difference on this side was when I put this piece in right here. The hole for the brake mount was the old hole for the little tab on the side. I just drilled it out and mounted it right back in there, tapped it. So I still got to put down the coils on this side, but we'll get some tires on this thing, see what it looks like on its own weight. Alright, so here it is on its 4 wheels. Took it around the block real quick. I need to put about a 1/2 inch more lift in the front end and then it's ready for an alignment. That'll get it sitting about perfect. So anyway, ride's nice. That's how it all goes together.